This is a continuation of our discussion that we had, I believe, on Tuesday in regards to the failing of our budget and then possible options to make some changes. So, Laura, I think you've been hard at work, and John, you as well. What do we have?
Yeah. So as Laura's getting situated, I'll just kind of jump in here. So per the last discussions we had on Tuesday, we've provided a couple columns where we have reduced the tax levy to 0%. They're outlined there. And I know that Laura kind of had a working document for all of you that you could kind of plug in some numbers to kind of see how it impacts. So I will then turn it over to Laura for her to kind of walk you through it, to show you the different scenarios, and hopefully by the end of today, just because the timeline is very swift, that there's a decision from the board on adoption. I do have 3 different resolutions here for you, depending on the direction, so we can actually just walk these in. They are part of the board agenda, so we'll go from there, and hopefully we can have a consensus on moving forward tonight.
So just a recap, so this is what our contingent budget would look like. We would only be taking out the $142,000 and change. That was the proposed budget increase. And these would be the expenses that would need to be removed from the budget, which total this amount, the $954,000. So our total contingent budget would be $24,601,302. So we have 2 other options. If we have a 0% levy increase, if we do want to go out for a revote, this one is using no appropriated fund balance and no reserves. This is with removing the bus purchases. We would have to remove another $1.3 million from the budget to equal this total. Or if we use some reserves and appropriated fund balance, we can discuss that tonight. And as we add in the numbers here, for example, if you want to use the same amount of reserves that were in the proposed budget, that changes our revenue, and that changes the amount we would have to reduce from this budget. So this is with the buses removed. If you want to put the buses back in, I can change this number. So,
your contingency budget,
yes.
Appropriated fund balance isn't in that. Can you not use that in the contingency?
We can use it. I just left it out because we didn't have to use it. These are the expenses that have to come out. I started there. If the board wants to remove more expenses, we can do that in the contingent budget. I just thought it would, since some of our reserves are a little more overfunded, I just reduced the reserves, and there's no need to use the appropriated fund balance. If the board would like to use some appropriated fund balance and some reserves, we can do that as well.
Could you go over what's being taken out, the things that are being taken out of the contingent? I know you have it up there, but again, it's hard for people to read that far away, and there's not a list of the contingent, which was requested last time. So when we were discussing it last time, I just want to know what are the things that are coming out for the contingent.
Okay, so how much, is this board discussion? Am I answering all the questions?
I can't. I just want to know, I did ask for this information. I'm just asking what's being taken out on the 0 contingent. I don't think that's a,
so we can,
and she's going back and forth between the 2 screens, so I can't, I'm trying to write it down as quick as I can.
So under New York state law, we're kind of handcuffed with a contingent budget. One of the things that immediately has to come out is any and all purchases of equipment. So you can see that there's different lines. Some of it is under different components, like the capital, because like you talk about a floor scrubber and a floor polisher, you know, the 0-turn mower, we're not able to purchase any additional equipment. So some of that is like buildings and grounds. The program component, we have some equipment at the middle high school. There's some band equipment there. I believe that's a replacement of a musical instrument.
They're lyres for marching. So our marching band, those are the sheet music holders that attach to the different instruments. Okay. So they attach differently to different instruments.
When you say middle school, middle high school equipment, what is that
Yeah.
exactly?
It's a whole bunch of different little tiny additions that, teachers have requested that we have included in the budget.
Okay.
There's probably a handful of little minor things that add up to that. We did have fitness center equipment. We have some dumbbells and I believe a machine that needs to be repaired. The dumbbells are at the end of life, so we have added that in there for, obviously, for this budget under the athletic code. That would have to come out. There is some OC-Ed equipment. Again, a lot of minor things that, PT, OT, the behavior specialists have added in as far as equipment goes. The bus garage equipment, remind me what that was, Laura?
I don't know the individual amounts that go into there, what Josh requested.
And then
wasn't a note.
we receive, under the SAFE grant, we receive, aid back on security cameras, so we can update, I believe it's 4 cameras every single year, but because that falls under new equipment, that would have to come out.
Okay.
Obviously, under the contingent budget, we cannot purchase buses. We can't do our transfer to capital, which has been in the budget as far as when debt comes off, we do a transfer to capital for these capital projects. The capital outlay is $100,000 a year. We get aided back each and every year at about 90%. So we're able to do really a $100,000 capital project each and every year for about 10 grand. It's a good investment. We're not able to have that. So when you add up all of those, should I say, expenditures in the amount of $954,000, that's what really is required. This isn't a list that we sat down and said, okay, what can we do without? This is required to come out. To Pete's question about not using the appropriated fund balance, because we have to, in a contingent budget, reduce expenditures $954,000, then we don't need to use any more reserves to cover the budget.
Thank you. And again, not trying to break protocol. I just
Nope,
want
that's
to
fine.
understand. And so
Yep.
going forward, if anybody has any
Yep.
questions, we wait till the very end instead of asking while it's happening. I
Sure.
just want to know what the protocol is.
No, that's fine.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
To be
And
honest
part,
with you, nobody ever comes to these budget workshops. We did several of them, so
Yeah.
we don't have a great protocol for it because
No, and
usually
that's
it's a bunch
why
of empty
when
chairs and that's
Ms.
just talking.
Kowalczyk
So.
asked if we were allowed to ask questions, I just didn't want to break protocol.
Honestly, for me, questions help me understand too. So like I don't.
Yeah,
know.
I've
I
got-
wasn't sure how it worked either, I didn't want to start standing in
Well, I
it.
think we're good with questions.
I was speaking before and I was cut off because I felt like I did something wrong and I'd like to know if we're allowed to speak now or after.
so in the contingent budget too, we do have to preserve our property. Anything that is deemed, program related, anything for our services, academics. This doesn't, it doesn't cut sports or anything like that. But anything that's in addition that the school district would be
Use of
expending,
facilities.
yes. So the one question came up last time about the use of facilities. There's a question about, would outside groups be able to use our facilities? If a couple years ago, when we were allowing them to use our facilities really for free, which was kind of costing the district manpower, the answer would be no. So moving forward, if we ever did adopt a contingent budget, what we would have to ensure if we were letting outside groups use our facilities is that we aren't expending an extra penny for that we have to make sure that we're 100% whole if we ever did that.
So-
I'm in favor of the original budget, but I wanted to ask this question because this was a big deal back when the youth sports groups were told they might have to pay a fee and they didn't know it. Do you have any idea what the fee would be if there was a facilities use fee?
So the board adopted a facilities use fee, I want to say a year ago. Currently, right now, I believe it's $50 an hour for the use of our gymnasiums.
I think that would have to be revisited under a contingent budget to make sure we're covering all costs.
Correct. Yeah, currently, right now, it's $50 an hour for the gymnasiums. I believe the same, I think, it really depends on the event. It really depends on the manpower if we need to, facilitate. Sometimes a Saturday afternoon, a Little League ball team will use our fields. Well, if it doesn't need to be landscaped, doesn't need to be lined, and they're just out there on a Saturday afternoon hitting some grounders,
Right.
so be it. But if there's ever a cost to the district, if the youth program wanted to have a Saturday night practice and we have to put the lights on,
Right. Okay.
that's where it needs to be revisited.
I think this gentleman had something he wanted to ask or say, and I'm sorry that I may
No,
have stepped on
thank you.
your.
They refused to answer my question. Ms. Carla and give me my answer. I was wondering if we were allowed to ask questions about the budget during the conversation, or we have to wait to the end to just get a clear answer on the operation of this. Because one of my questions was the buses. I heard you bring up before, there's a contingency for you guys to buy electric buses. You were gonna wait to see how that played out before committing.
They
I
weren't
see that
electric.
That's coming out.
They're
I
diesel
agree.
buses.
The buses you have can probably do okay. You have a mechanic. I mean,
Yeah, so the question is, we have like a 10-year rotation on our buses. So we have approximately 18 buses in our fleet. So every 2 years, we upgrade our buses to get rid of the buses that are, 10, 12 years old, because it's really not feasible to keep the upkeep. They have to be inspected each and every year, and the more that there's the wear and tear, the harder it is to, provide services that ends up costing the district money.
They're out now because they have to be out now, right?
Not yet, Mr. Muker. We still have to make a decision
Okay.
Yeah.
of what the.
I thought they were required to take the equipment out.
In the contingent budget, right?
So if there's several possibilities that we can do. One of them, Mr. Muker, is to just go right back and say, well, here's the budget that we put out originally that failed, and we have the opportunity to do that. Or we can make adjustments to that budget, send it out again, and it has a possibility of passing or failing. Or the contingency is a contingency budget that's kind of regulated by the state, saying that any purchase in capital here just can't occur. So there's three kind of bigger options that we can adjust as we go through there. I don't know if that helps.
To be clear, they're not all capital component purchases, they're equipment. So some of them are out of the program component. So the band equipment would be out of the program component.
Sure.
And a couple other things, the security cameras are out of the administrative component.
If
I
you
know-
can't make the, oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, and just to clarify, I know Mr. Knapp on Tuesday had a question. The bus purchases are the diesel buses. We have not broached the subject, even though we had a complete assessment done as far as, installing and having the EV buses here. We're not there yet. So we still can buy diesel buses. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What is the impact of a contingency budget if you cannot do the transfers to the capital accounts or capital projects that you have? In what way will that affect those capital projects?
It wouldn't affect the project, we would
Okay.
just have to finance that money.
Okay, so instead of paying it now, we'd have to finance it?
It would be financed, so
Okay.
there would be some interest
Interest.
included over the next 15 years. The maximum cost of the project would stay the same, the scope would stay the same, and outside of any changes that happen because of the project, not the financing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess to make clear your question, if we did this transfer to capital or not moving forward this next school year, this has really nothing to do with the work of the capital project.
Right,
It's
and I
gonna-
understand, I
right.
guess, I
I'm
just want the voters to understand that if we don't pay the money now, we're just going to pay more because we're gonna have to pay an interest
Yeah.
Correct,
amount on it as well, so.
correct.
That, I just wanted to make sure I had that in my head, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the
What
0%
happens if the
upfront.
project goes over budget?
It can't go over budget. The scope would be changed to keep it under budget.
Even for unforeseen conditions or something?
There is incidentals built into the budget for unforeseen things, and
That
just
cost-
like when.
That cost is already baked in.
Yes, and if by some chance something astronomical happens, we would just have to reduce the scope of the capital project in other areas.
You wouldn't finance any.
No, we would not go over the amount the voters approved.
So did you have a question?
No.
Tina has a question.
Hi, Tina.
I have a couple quick questions, would that be okay? How would a contingent budget affect field trips, sports buses for sports? Are those?
Those
like,
are
is
all
everything-
considered contingent expenses, so those would continue.
Okay, so those would be included, not
Yes.
cut in a contingent?
Correct.
And besides the fitness center costs that are cut?
Oh, I'm sorry, those are
Not contingent?
not contingent expenses.
So they're included?
We would still continue with field trips and, yes,
Okay.
the athletic trips,
So-
yes,
Okay.
those are included.
And then besides the fitness center costs that were cut, were any other cuts made to any other athletic?
I think gym
Okay.
banners were included in the equipment somewhere.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure, JC would have to tell us exactly what those banners were.
Yes, we were looking
that
to kind of redo the inside of the gymnasium. You see the different plaques and you know, sectional titles and state titles and all the years. We were looking to streamline that and you know, have different banners. They're old up there, and you know, since 2021, when you know, we added, you know, 9 extra sectional titles and things, it's kind of getting to be a little bit of a mishmash, you know, of colors and stuff. So we wanted to streamline all of that, so it's easy to add the years on, to have different banners and upgrade the gymnasium. We would not be able to purchase those things. As far as sports goes, you know, this isn't about eliminating sports. It's not about eliminating uniforms, because that's part of, you know, our educational program here. So those types of things would not be reduced. They're part of our programming here.
And then as far as the band equipment, would that just be it for the music department that's cut? You wouldn't be cutting like their solo fest trips or
Correct.
their
Correct.
concert nights?
Correct.
That stuff would still be able to be
Correct.
occurring?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you speak a little bit about, just because I know the community had questions regarding, you know, youth sports, utilizing the facilities and things like that, how that would play a role into these options that are being
Sure.
presented?
Under the contingent budget, we have to make sure that any outside group that's not associated as a school sport cannot cost the district a penny under a contingent budget. So when we talk about possibly looking at the cost, like currently right now, we have a facilities use fee of, let's say, $50 an hour for the gymnasium. If we really had to scrub those numbers, I still believe that we kind of fall short, just based on having people here, the utilities.
Sometimes
And
clean up.
so that was kind of like a flat rate. We may have to revisit that to make sure that we, you know, not that we want to make a profit, but that we cannot be losing money when an outside group uses our facilities.
Right, yeah, I think that clarification is definitely important to the community. As it stands right now, we do allow the community to come in and use the facility during
Correct.
weeknights up to a certain time,
Correct.
without a fee associated with that, and then after hours and weekends, obviously, there is a fee associated with that. Would you foresee that Monday through Friday time potentially changing? Like, I don't know if it's like until 8 or 9 o'clock now. Do you see that being cut back as a result of this?
It's a good possibility.
Okay.
We also have fitness center hours for the community that we staff. We have the open swim that would no longer be available to our residents.
So we talked about like a few groups that we sort of asked for there not to be a charge. It was the Hall of Fame committee, it was PTO. Were there any other groups other than the youth, the Saturday youth, the Titans outdoors? But you've kind of made mention, John, that if they're outdoors, assume they don't need the lights.
Right.
That's not a problem. Is there any other groups that is that it?
The youth basketball team.
It was the youth, right? The youth programs that are in here, and they were, considered our community. It was the travel that was associated with the charge, right? So those would.
Is the softball, baseball, like 12U? I know back in my day, in March, April or whatever, March probably, we were in, are they still using?
So they weren't able to get gym time this season for the youth, the Oakfield Little League.
Yeah.
So to my knowledge, there hasn't been any baseball or
wasn't any
softball
for
inside,
migrants.
Okay.
just because the nature of the beast during the
But in
month
the
of
past,
March.
though, it was used.
Yeah.
I can remember using
Yeah.
it with my Katie.
Yeah.
If anybody is looking online right now and wants to know what the policy is, it's policy 3280 under community relations, and it's use of facilities, policy, and form. And that gives you the whole breakdown of who's included, how much the fees are, and the general policy at hand that we're talking about currently.
And just to make it clear, if the board decides to either go back out with this budget that we originally had or decide to tweak it, and we do go out for some sort of revote, this is our last chance. The voting would happen on June 17th. We'd have it from 11 to 8. We would have another budget newsletter to go out to kind of explain the differences. We'd have a budget hearing, which we scheduled for Monday, June 9th. To explain what this new budget is. We would still need a 60% voter approval. If we're at the 0%, which still exceeds our negative tax cap, so we would need still the 60% voter approval. And if for some reason that was defeated, we would immediately have to adopt this contingent budget. So those are really the board's and the community's options at this point.
So you have to vote no matter what. I mean, people should be voting. They shouldn't think that just because there's no tax cap, or that we're not going with the 2.5 tax cap budget. That's what I'll call it. But even if we go with the contingency that strips everything out, we still need 60% to pass it. Or whatever other type of budget you guys come up with that might be in between the two, between the contingency and the
I
original.
think the contingency just happens.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
Contingency
just default.
immediately
I mean,
goes
it just
into effect.
happens, but I'm just saying if people, they need to vote, I guess is what
Yes.
I'm saying. Because
On
if you
June
do
7th.
something in between or you stay with the original, if you like it, you have to come out and vote. Or even if you don't, you
like
have
it,
to come out and vote.
yeah.
It's
Yes.
60%, it's not 50,
Yes.
regardless.
Correct.
So it's the original, the revised, and then the default would be the contingency. Like, are those the three categories?
No, so we don't even know what we're proposing yet.
Right.
So
Correct.
it may
Right, these
not-
are just
we-
options at this
That's what
time.
we're here to figure out.
That's what we're figuring out.
For our meeting schedule, just because I want to be straight, are we saying, so we were scheduled to meet June 17th, but are we saying we're meeting June 10th regardless?
9, I think he just said.
The 9th is
So,
a
so,
Monday?
yes, so this is a very strict timeline for a revote. It is 100% in the state that if you go out for a revote, it's June 17th. That is also the night of our board meeting. Because of the timeline, and if it's June 17th, then you work backwards. We have to have a budget hearing 7 to 14 days before the vote. However, it has to be 7 days after the board adopts the budget, which is almost imperative that we leave here tonight with a direction, because we have to wait, the budget hearing cannot happen, you have to wait a week to have your budget hearing after the board adopts a budget. So if you do it this Friday, tonight, you wait a whole nother week, which is the following Friday, then that following Monday, which is June 9th, you need to have
The budget hearing?
correct.
And that will be our board meeting for the month of June. We won't meet on the 17th.
We could change it. That would be up to the board, you could.
Well, let's get there. Let's get there first. Let's get through this.
Decide which-
Laura,
Yep.
did you get a chance to
Save it.
firm up the fund balance of whether or not we actually have this 738? Seemed like there was some confusion around that
Yes,
last meeting.
when Scott originally put in that number, it was there, even though the budget was underperforming. We did have a projection at that time, which didn't look great, but the numbers were there. I have been working on a projection, but being new to the district, I really have to go line by line because I don't recognize every expense and every revenue. I have to dig into, is it a recurring one? How much does it fluctuate? So that's taking me time. But to hasten that process, I'm having our external auditors, the accountant come in Monday to go over the financial package from last year and hopefully speed along with the projection for this year.
So why is our budget underperforming? I guess I was pretty disappointed to first hear about that just this week after going through the budget process and never hearing that we were underperforming. So is it an overspending issue or a lack of income issue?
I think it's a bit of
I think
both.
I don't think it's overspending. Let's just talk gas, electric, utilities. 1.5 to twice as much. I mean, kind of like your households, all of a sudden, you're gonna get your electric bill and go, why did it go up $200 from last month? It's just the environment that we're in. We are very frugal with our spending. We usually shut down our budget, usually by the end of November, December, because my philosophy is if teachers don't need it for the first 3 months, unless you have some open POs and there's some emergencies, we stop purchasing, and everything then goes through our office if somebody needs something. It's just a lot of unforeseen, like I said, expenditures that are popping up. It's not the overspending.
But it didn't just pop up right in the last month. I mean, we've kind of seen this trend going on.
And when I say that it's underperforming, to Matt's point on Tuesday, you're not going to see any sort of great surplus at the end of the year. I guess that's kind of where this is headed. In years past, we've budgeted to almost 95, 96%, where if we have an $800,000 or $1 million surplus on a $23 million budget, that's actually pretty good. People might balk at that and say, whoa. Percentage-wise, it's very, very good. You're not going to see that type of surplus at the end of this year.
On the income side, so you asked about income and expenses. On the income side, we're receiving all income that we expected or not?
So far.
Can I ask a question on that point? It's not income, it's more state aid question. My understanding, and I could be wrong, was when the original budget was drafted, there was an anticipation that there was going to be a negative amount of aid from the state, like less than $100,000 than the year before. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then when the budget, then when when everything was passed, I think the district ended up getting $200,000 from the state.
So
that you weren't
so
anticipating?
we get multiple different aids. I don't know if you want to search for that slide. We were more curious on the foundation aid. There's BOCES aids, there's transportation aids, there's a handful of different aids. What we were concerned about in the governor's initial run was school districts were getting foundation aid, and at the minimum, school districts were getting 2%. We got the minimum of 2%. That's a concern for us because foundation aid is a larger part of the aids that we do get. Obviously, with the governor's delay in adopting their own state budget, the House and Assembly came out and recommended at least a 3% minimum.
Okay.
Kind of watching the governor, her delay wasn't really about the money, it was about some of the policies and so we really didn't have a sense of what we were going to get. So we built this budget based on the House and Assembly saying we're going to get the 3%. And so the governor actually came out and we received, I think, 2.79%.
Okay.
So we did get a little bit of an increase. But overall, our aids from the previous year has decreased. And I don't know if you...
I didn't update the...
But when the original budget went out, you put in, based on what the Senate and the Assembly said to do, though, in the original budget that was put out to vote?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I
And then
understood
I want to say that we were about $242,000 short, and when we received that additional, we were about, and I'm just throwing this up, about $142,000 short.
Okay.
I had
have the number here.
Okay.
It was $84,877 more than we expected. So
I think the bigger picture of what John's trying to explain though too is like in the years past, the state used to give us a lot more
Yeah.
percentage. And it's just the rural, I'd say more of the rural districts that they've
Correct.
really clamped down on the last 2 years.
I was hoping that we were gonna hear that you got more and that was gonna affect what was going on here today, so.
it was
but I'm-
84,000,
Yeah.
which is $25 million budget.
Oh, I get it, but every.
And this initial budget that we went out with contained that 3% minimum. And so, it's very difficult for school districts like us who rely a lot on state aid, and when, they do the hold harmless where we're not going to decrease your state aid, but, we may not just give you any more. You just talk about inflation and expenses and things going up. Obviously, when your expenditures go up and the revenue coming in, mostly from the state, remains the same, that's where the issue lies.
Yeah, I think that's obviously another factor that came in before the state fully funded foundation aid. Oakfield-Alabama was one of the districts getting over 100% of the calculated aid, where a lot of other districts in the state were getting well under their calculated aid, and for political reasons or whatever other reasons. So when they went to fully fund aid, like John just said, they weren't going to reduce our aid, but they're not going to keep increasing it because we're already getting over 100% for a lot of years.
Right.
So that may have contributed a little bit to additional funds in previous years and why they're dropping off a little bit now. It's a series of factors though, not just one.
I think from a voter aspect though, what do people think about the budget? Like, what do they want to see? Like, I would like to see as much as possible stay in, but I know I'm a minority voice maybe at this point. But I would like to see the buses be swung out and just done on a separate vote. Maybe that helps in some way. And I think there's just too much information going out right now that it's information overload. And with what was presented at the last budget meeting, that basically the buses get paid for 90%, and by the time we sell the 2 buses, we're actually making money on the deal. But there's just so much going on, I don't think you can get everybody to understand that message. Is there any way we can roll out and do a separate vote on the on the buses so that people can be educated about what's going on with the buses, and then just look at what we have now? I really don't want to have youth sports not be able to use the facilities, because that's going to impact the fees that parents have to pay for their kids to be in these sports, and that's going to impact people's ability to have their kids participate, bottom line, particularly if you're saying it's going to have to go up, which I understand, but I would like to have a budget.
Is there a number for the impacts to parents that these program cuts would have impacts on parents?
I think, Mr. Muker, it would be based on what is that hourly fee that's within that policy, and then it would go back to that youth program and say, well, here's what it's now going to cost you, right? And then determine what your enrollment is, and then divide that up by what your new cost is, and add it on to what it would have to be to now participate, I suppose.
That's just for using the facilities. I was talking the overall budget. Like, if you're making cuts to the buses and then you're re-voting on them, it's still kind of a cost that gets put directly on the taxpayer instead of through the budget. It's like these cuts to music, people have to now purchase these things to cooperate in music.
So some of the equipment is just not updating it, like it's there, we're just not gonna update it, but for the bus comment, and during the last meeting, we've kind of talked a lot about this, and it's a good question, because it's a question that a lot of people had in the community, and honestly, like, we all learned, I think, quite a bit about the buses.
So they would be financed if they were voted on a separate bill.
Right, so the way
that would have an increased cost.
Right, well, so the way the busing works though is right now we're in a rotation when we,
Versus if this budget got passed, if it was voted and passed, there would be an adverse
Mhm.
cost. In the long term, it would cost the taxpayer. a
so
significant-
no, because there's certain things that are state aidable, right? So when we make an upfront purchase for a school bus, every year we get reimbursed money back on that bus. And then when it's lived its span with us, we sell it. And then we're able to take the money from that and it offsets any deficit that was incurred, any, gaps that we had between the money we got back, and what we had spent. So let's say a bus cost, just for a nice round number, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but I learned a lot at the last meeting.
187.
So can we call it 200? I mean 187, and I gotta go
It's
to
not
decimals,
easy.
it's too easy
200.
for me. Let's call it 200, all right? So if we get a certain percentage of that, let's say the state is going to reimburse us, what?
180.
180 on the 200,
Yes.
right? So now we're out of pocket 20, but then we sell them.
We just sold one for 34.
Right, so we're actually turning a profit on it. So we front that cost, but then we actually end up turning a profit like on a resale value of it. So they're good, it's an investment, but we make money in the long run on it. So, and it's keeping our kiddos,
Safe.
on safe buses, all year round, so. Does that help? I know that sometimes when it comes to like resale and state aid, I know that it sounds a little bit confusing, but
No,
you gotta
you
spend the
explained
money
it
up
very
front.
well.
What's
You're-
that?
You explained it very well. Through the aid and the
Sure,
programs, you're
Good.
actually turning a profit.
yes,
I
thank you.
guess if that ends in the future, that's a discussion for the future. The aid.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, certainly, for sure.
Yeah, Tina, go
Going
ahead.
back to an example for youth sports, I just did a little bit of math because I'm sure people, so let's take, for example, we'll say a fifth grade boys basketball team. So they roughly practice 4 weeks in November, 4 weeks in December, 2 practices per week, so that's 8 practices per month. And then usually once games start, they usually do half the home games and half the away. So I figured out for like one team, that'd be 22 to 24 days using the gym for basketball season. So, but I know multiple teams do sometimes in one night, so they'd be sharing that cost. So are you thinking like, if they're there for a couple hours, that'd potentially be $100 per day just for practices? And then on top of the game days, when it's hours, like from what, 8 or 9 a.m. until 5? That's a lot of money. I know it would be spread across all those teams,
Mhm.
but that is a lot of money added to those youth.
But those youth teams,
Teams.
John, didn't we just say are excluded?
No,
Or
because
wouldn't
they're not
be
school teams,
excluded
they're
under the
school
teams,
contingency
they're
budget? So you're saying youth basketball would have to pay
Yes,
Yeah.
the entire Saturday?
yes.
Yeah.
So right now, the
That's
hourly.
$900.
If it's
You
not
can
an
$500
extension
a day
of
on
our
Saturday
sports
days.
like physical sports, like our sports, all the youth sports, all the youth programs, we cannot be obligated to lose any sort of our funds, taxpayers' money for those types of things.
So Melissa, ask that question again
Go ahead.
about going to vote?
Oh, yeah,
Coming out to vote.
everybody, you need to vote, whether you're for it or against it, but just realize
Whatever the outcome
there's
is.
something about this community that I think really does care and wants to make the right vote. They just need to be informed, and I think this would be a great time for the board to explain what the out-of-pocket expense is for the voter annually if it went through at a 2.5% over the tax cap versus, we're talking how many dollars at the end of the year for the taxpayer. I think that would be a good point for people to understand with the 2.5 tax cap, and then if we went to 0.
There's a slide for
It-
that.
I know,
It
I'm
is-
just,
that-
I like
Yeah, that
it.
was part of our budget newsletter.
Yes.
It's in there, it was part of our slide.
I think, just going back to what someone had said on Tuesday though,
One
even just
second.
throwing it up there and breaking it down,
Bullet
know,
points.
for
Yeah,
everybody
with all the
that's
numbers.
watching or here to understand, like, this is how, because some people are escrow, right? So you wanna know monthly
What is, how's
what
that
that's
going
gonna
to-
look like versus annually for those that pay upfront, and also, what is it based on?
I think people will be shocked
I
when
do
they
too.
see what it means in real dollars out of your pocket. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you see it on paper.
Versus having youth basketball go up to like $250 for registration instead of 50 or whatever it is.
It's probably
Because,
realistic.
you know, it will triple or quadruple in price if you're paying those fees for the season as an organization.
Well,
So
the bigger
it's
picture though
only
is,
$10 or $20 a month in your taxes.
the bigger picture is though that the community also has to realize where we're at. This 2.5% isn't just this year.
I get it, and I know things have
It's going
to,
to be multiple, so it's not like, hey, we're gonna raise taxes 2.5% this year and then we're good. We
Right.
have a whole to climb out of here that
Yeah.
it's gonna be multiple years of tax increases if that's the course that we stick. And I just want people to realize that it's not a, you know, hey, we'll raise our taxes this year, we're good.
right.
It's multiple years of taxes going up.
And that's true too, that's a very good point made. But I think people are thinking this is, I don't know, I won't say anything more, I'll just let her go.
It needs to be
Elizabeth.
looked at, from my opinion, for sure, and, I think, yeah, it sounds like some cuts. What is the board's plan, to propose the same budget or make cuts?
That's what they're trying to decide.
That's what we're trying to get
now.
at,
My
Mr. Meeker.
recommendation is when your income's going down and your expenditures are up, you know the answer.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Mr. Fiskus, I'd have to disagree with the spending's not the problem. It may not be the problem, but it's a part of the solution, so you guys know what to do, you're responsible adults in there, look around, there's cuts that can be made that aren't necessary. It seems like you've looked at them as part of your contingency budget. I think you do what's best, people are gonna support you. So, and then go in high and make adjustments and.
One of the biggest cuts in the contingency budget, though, is
Look
an
into the
aid-driven
future.
expense. So in
I know.
future years, our revenue would be cut as well.
Everybody's on tough times, so yeah.
Right, so would you explain that to me again though, just so I have it in,
Yes, so these are the historical tax rates, and I know last time we were talking about people's assessments going up, which if an individual assessment goes up, it doesn't necessarily mean your taxes are going up. It depends on how your assessment goes up compared to the people around you. So as you have a higher total assessed value, it actually reduces the tax rate. So our tax rate, this is estimated because I don't have the total assessments for this year yet. We'll get those in the summer. So this is estimated based on last year's assessments. It's $17.68 per 100,000. So for every 100,000 of your home, your taxes would go up $43 for the entire year
right?
with
so-
the 2.5%.
So if your house is assessed at $100,000, your tax, it would be
Yes.
$43.13 added on to what you're already,
Correct, for the year.
for the year total.
Yes, the
Yeah,
whole
okay,
year. Yep.
gotcha. That's what we're talking about.
That's at 2.5%.
That's at
That's at
2.5,
2.5,
right.
If you go out at 0,
That's 1 or 2 trips to McDonald's for a family a year, so it's either that or
I mean, you could go somewhere in between, I
What's
mean,
the ratio, like if you're, so every $100,000 is 43?
Yes, for every $100,000, yes. So if your property is assessed at $200,000, it would be $86.26.
Annually, that breaks down to
Annually, yes.
$7.11 a month. If you're an escrow.
at the 2.5.
At the
Again,
2.5.
like that's, and I'd like to not cut the conversation out at all, but I'd like to start to move forward a
Yeah.
little bit with this. And the idea that I don't think on the table right now, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we're looking to go back with the same proposed budget.
I don't think you can, there's too many people out there that, I don't think you can, I think you gotta do something different, I agree.
So,
Little something.
yeah, so at this point, this is where we have to kind of say, where are we thinking about going out as far as taxes? I'm feeling that 0% is where we have to land, but that's just how I'm feeling right now. And so from there, then it's how much of the reserves are we looking to use or not to use? And how do we go about doing that? I think at this point right now, the low-hanging fruit is the buses, right? So if we pull those out, and then perhaps if we either put it in a proposal or push those out to after our budget vote, we come back and we look at it as a vote down the road, that's something we could look into. Great catch. That was really good. That's an idea. I think there's some feelings about being a little bit more aggressive than that and not touching our reserves at all. So that would involve more decision-making, perhaps, and it would have to be tonight because Tuesday's our deadline, and I don't think we're gonna have a turnaround from Monday and then Tuesday to get back to this. I don't know if I'm putting that in the correct context, if that's where we're at right now. And then there's possibly a contingent budget, I believe, as well, that we just go right to contingent. So those are kind of some ideas out there.
So if we took the buses out completely, that would put us to the potential of a negative tax levy.
The tax levy, if out at zero, that's gonna stay the same. So if you're reducing the expenses.
So go all things equal for me, if you
Yep.
would, on the use of the reserves, or
Yep.
excuse me,
So here,
on the use
if
of
we're,
appropriated fund balance.
yep,
Make that the 738,800. And then just drop the buses out.
yep, the buses are out here.
And what does that bottom line you then? Does that make us
So
over?
here, we'd still have to cut $621,416 if, we
So-
use the same reserves.
So keep the reserves
put the
the same
reserves
number
Is
if
that
you
what
would.
the bus is generating the income?
Mm-hmm.
And then you take us down to that
Yeah.
bottom
Yep.
number?
So you should be losing money. Taking the bus
The
down.
income
You wouldn't
doesn't
have
come
to
into
use
it.
as many reserves.
So we're-
It would be in the
Oh,
future.
so
So we're overfunded
Oh,
at that
we're over,
point.
yes.
And so that's where I'm saying, we
So
can get
the-
under
I
the
think it
tax
was-
cap. If we use the reserves, if we use our appropriate fund balance, we can reduce, make the tax levy, what's our tax cap, negative 2.6?
So, let me think what, I don't know what amount that would be off.
So, so every 1% is 60,000, so $160,000 if we reduce 2.6%. And we were overfunded by like 300,000 at the bottom of that, was it?
Yeah.
Yes,
So that would mean
really.
140,000, if we went to negative 2.6, you could take $140,000 off of reserves. So instead of 479, we could use 339. Be negative 2.6, not need supermajority. Buses have to go on a separate proposition.
What did you just put from reserves? You dropped that to what? 339, is that what that says? Okay.
So you're looking to stay at the tax cap, so our levy would be less than the previous year. So we'd only need the 50%.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's what we've got to do, but that's what this looks like if we do that, right?
I sent, just before the meeting, an email with what the bus purchases would look like if we finance them. So that could be part of the discussion as well, if you're looking to put them on a separate proposition. In the end, it'll cost the district more to do it that way.
Kind of seems like they got to go.
They what?
Seems like they gotta go. So I think we get the points about the 90%, but it's either that or we're cutting staff and we're cutting programs. Like, I don't know where else we're gonna find $450,000 to materially change this budget to something that can get passed in the community.
That's the problem though, is that just gets us past this budget and it doesn't help us with the next budget. And that's where the problem is, and so just taking all emotion out of it, like no tie to kids, strictly looking at numbers, we have to drop $1 million this year, next year.
Both years or
No.
altogether?
In the next 2 years, you have to drop $1 million. Plus raise taxes to get us through, because next year, every year, everybody's salaries increased by a certain percentage, so that's an added cost. You've got inflation, you've got everything else. The only way I see it is and all this stuff that's on here, these aren't cuts. This is kicking the can down the road. Next year, all that stuff's gonna be on here again, because everybody's gonna ask for it. We're gonna need buses next year, we're gonna need the lawnmower next year. You need $500,000 this year of true cuts that we aren't paying for ever again. And that's,
How can we generate an income?
Right.
So,
But that's the issue, right, Mr.
Right.
Nuker, like expenses and revenue, and how do we get more revenue? And that's where we're stuck. We're lucky enough to have the pilots that are coming in, which is fortunate for us. But other than that, I mean, this is where it's an absolute challenge.
so if you pull the buses out, and you make it like a separate proposition vote on that same day, like, so would voters potentially be voting on a budget and then a bus proposition, potentially?
Potentially.
If they did that, if there was a bus proposition, then does that mean because it's out of the budget, you can't do the 5-year plan with them?
We still get the
Oh, yeah,
aid.
you can.
Okay, I wonder
It
if
will
that
just be
aid went away if
financed.
it wasn't included in the
We have
first.
to just cut.
Just
Even
cost
if
of
it wasn't included in that, if it was a proposition, you'd be paying interest?
Yes.
Okay.
Right,
So
so
the
you have
only
to
way to
spend
get
more
the-
money.
but even like the buses is like, yeah, it pulls it out and you get by this year, but honestly, we get all the money back for the buses, so it's like, you're kind of cutting your own wrist to do that. Same thing with the capital outlay project, there's $100,000, but we get that money back. So
Exactly.
right now, it's more of a cash flow issue than it is, you know, of any of that stuff. All that stuff does is help cash flow for this year. It doesn't help the overall big picture of where we're at. And if you don't start this year, like next year's budget's gonna be harder to get through than this one.
Yeah, it's double the amount that you're.
What is the recommendation for things that can be cut then? I don't have a full budget right here in front of me, so I can't look at line items. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. What do you guys
Basically
think?
everything in the contingent, but you said no because you're going to need those.
It's
That's
gonna
all.
be people, it's gonna be personnel.
It's gonna be personnel.
Really?
Absolutely, because there's nothing else that really we can get rid of. There really isn't, and I guess that's not where I really want to go tonight. I have no desire to be cutting personnel. I really don't, and here's the crazy thing.
That should be our number one priority.
That's correct, and here it is already, and I think you mentioned the last time, Melissa, is that out of 7 people that are retiring, 6 aren't coming back.
Right.
And in most districts of our size, that would be incredibly alarming, and it was to me when that first came out. And so to think about dropping it down to an even, or raising it up to an even larger number is even more concerning to me tonight.
Because we were, you know.
3
I
weeks
don't know
ago,
if-
we weren't,
I don't know if fortunate is the right word to use, but you're probably not gonna be in a spot where 6 teachers,
Not a
7
chance.
teachers are retired
No.
next year.
Well,
and
we had a few
replacement.
last year.
That
So we
was-
kind of,
Explained your teacher-to-kid ratio at board meeting. Weren't you already kind of maxed out on
not yet, Mr. Muker.
teachers teaching multiple subjects? Or
I think we're still in good shape there. I still think that the class size and ratio is pretty low in the elementary, and there's a lot probably teachers that would be frustrated with me,
Well, and it don't necessarily have to be teachers either.
right? We're talking administration.
It wasn't like that when we went to school.
Support
There was
staff.
one teacher teaching one subject, but things have changed.
Sure,
What
kids have
about the
changed.
one bus run thing? Bringing the school times closer, how much would that help having 2 less bus runs a day?
I think it's something that needs to be looked at. Unfortunately, we
Because-
don't have time to.
But
do
yeah,
that.
time is of
If
the
we
essence, and
need
these are
time to
these are
plan
time
that.
sensitive.
So that
That's
would be
something
like a
to look
next
at for
future
time.
possibility on
It's-
the plan.
It's something that we can definitely look at. There's other concerns, even especially with the union.
I remember hearing that on the tape
You know,
from the last one, the union issues.
Yeah, Mr. Senator was
Their livelihood.
was correct in the contracts of, if these bus drivers don't have the 2 runs in the morning and 2 runs in the afternoon, and now they only have 2 runs total, it creates other obstacles for the district. I'm not saying
We can't use
that.
them because they'll go get a different job where they can make that much potentially also, so.
Well, we've seen districts, even with sporting events, you've got the same districts that are always rolling up an hour late to the sporting events, and part of that reason is because they've cut they're so lean in their transportation department that they're physically doing the best that they can. And again, going back to, you know, what I was trying to drive home last meeting, like, Oakfield is a special place. We choose to live here. We've either chosen to raise our kids in the district we lived in, like, we choose to come here because of the unique class sizes. I'm in multiple districts. Not one district has class sizes the size that we have. No district has consulting classrooms in every grade level at the elementary school. Just, we go above and beyond. We are busing our kids to and from school, to and from sporting events, where in other districts they're walking. If they're at the middle high school within a certain proximity, we don't do that. So yes, we spend a little bit of extra money, but it's because we get all of those things that make our district so great and so unique. So when you start chipping away at these things, right, your 20-minute bus run, guess what? You start chipping away at that, your kid's on a bus for 60, 70 minutes. So it's just things like that that, you know, need to be taken into consideration. Like, what are we willing to sacrifice? And what are some non-negotiables?
Or we can raise taxes 10%.
Yeah, I know. I mean, for me, the non-negotiable is the education piece, the
Right.
Saturday tutoring, but I'm gonna be honest, and I know I don't have a kid in this fight come next year, but having been a kid that had to ride the bus for an hour when I was growing up, if you're gonna have to make cuts, I think you gotta look at the busing situation. And you're saying you don't have time to do it this year, but I don't know. That seems to be something that would still keep all the other things afloat, that would at least help.
And if the buses only, like I heard somebody say some buses only have like 5 or 6 kids on them. I mean, somebody saw, I heard that somewhere, that somebody saw a bus with that many getting off, but the bus route would probably stay the same. It'll just be like double the kids per bus potentially.
And I think if we were to task Mr. Luxon, he has programs that he uses currently that would allow us to make a determination and give us some information and data that would help to make a better decision here.
But you feel that you're not in a position to make that for this budget year,
No,
right?
I don't.
Right,
No,
okay.
I really don't believe that that's possible. I think this conversation and what the discourse that we've had the last 2 nights really gives us a detailed list of what we're gonna have to do starting like as soon as this budget's over, of how are we going to come back and make sure that we're in a better spot, because this is extraordinarily uncomfortable, obviously. This is a bad place for us to be. And 3 weeks ago, I hate to say it, I felt okay. I wasn't confident that the budget was going to pass, but I felt much better than I do tonight.
Well, it's always scary when we've been at 0% for, again, and that's kind of a pride thing too, and it's nice to say we don't have to tax our community. And
For 10 years,
for
it's
a
been
long
like a
time,
0.9%.
and that's been kind of a
Yeah.
luxury. I think for all of us, it's just we assume the budget's going to pass, we assume it's going to be at 0%, and it's just unfortunately not the reality of where the economy is right now. It's a hard hit on all of us.
And one of the things to consider is, you know, as I speak right now, I believe there's 3 more retirements at the end of next year. And I've always believed in when you need to reduce staffing, that it's done through retirements and attrition. You're not affecting someone's, like, you know, when you hear school districts cutting positions, it's never good. So we were very lucky this year to have those retirements. My concern would be to reduce staff going into next year, and then you have 3 retirements, but now you turn around and say, well, I got to replace 2 or 3 of them because we already,
Specialties.
and so like I said, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's a hard balance. It really is when it comes to personnel and you know, programming and things like that. It makes it very, very difficult.
So you could cut the buses and there would be no impact this year to the income generated or the transportation of the children, because the buses that you were gonna replace will make it through this school year.
That's
And
probably a
even
question for
adding the
Josh.
buses wouldn't generate any more income because you're always replacing them. So
Right.
it's an even swap. So
It-
yeah. and the
Right,
bus
it's
is-
kind of like, we want to keep everything level, so that's why we have this rotation. For the capital outlay projects, we've been in this rotation well before I've been here, but that's why school districts do it. So you pay $100,000, you get $91,000 back, so you're getting, for $8,000, you're getting $100,000 worth of work, and you just keep going. All of a sudden, you don't do it, but then let's say next year you do it, well, you're not getting that revenue from the year that you didn't do it back the year, and so it ends up spiking and creating just a little bit of a wave in your budget, and that's the last thing that you want to happen.
So cutting the buses wouldn't put that wave in your budget, is what I was getting at, because it doesn't really affect the revenue as long as.
It would
If you
put the wave
guys
in the
talk
budget.
together and let's say we generated an income
does
for the
put
school,
it-
maybe a donation or whatever, and you guys were able to afford buses next year, there would be no impact from cutting the buses.
Yeah,
There would be an
yeah,
impact
we would
because
have-
we wouldn't get revenue. The revenue is split into 5 years. So we're currently getting transportation aid for buses we purchased in the past over 5 years. That's why we do the plan where they all overlap, so you're constantly getting aid
Oh, so because
as
the
you're spending.
buses will be
There'll
too
be,
old.
these will be cut. We won't get that aid going forward. When you add them back in, there'll be a gap in the year where the aid is coming in. So yes, there would be spikes and dips in your revenue and
I guess
expenses.
I'm having still a hard time understanding that. If your bus is paid for and you get 5 years of generation, and your bus isn't over 5 years old,
They are over 5 years old. We're replacing the oldest buses.
so you're not getting that income for the older buses, even if they function.
You're
Soon as
getting,
they
you're
hit
getting
5
the aid
years.
on the ones you purchased.
For 5 years.
Right.
Over 5 years, yes.
Right, okay.
We don't get aid as
So if
buses.
they're 6 years old, they're no longer,
They're paid for.
and you're no longer getting the credit that gives you a positive.
Correct, they've been paid off at that point, after 5 years.
Well, when you pay cash, they're paid up,
Right.
up,
No, it's not
Yes,
like-
upfront.
We're not getting
Right.
reimbursed.
We're not
for
getting
those.
that reimbursed.
Okay,
Right.
That makes sense. Guess I'm not used to paying things in full like that.
$450,000?
Right.
Come on, PTO, 450,000.
Yeah, there are other
No big
things that can be
deal.
done. If you don't want to roll the buses out, you don't want to change the busing schedules, then what else can you do?
Well, we do need to roll the buses out.
Okay.
We really do. It has to get rolled out. Then from there, what are we willing to do with our reserves? That's where we're at. I do not believe we're gonna sit here at this meeting tonight and say we're gonna start cutting people in these positions. I'm not prepared to do that, and I won't do that. That's something that's a conversation for the next year and the following year's budget. We have to look at our whole organization and really see, can we do more with less? Right now, though, I think that we have to get rid of these buses. I really do. Kicking can down the road or not, I think we have to get rid of it. And then from there, where are we going to be with our reserves? What are we willing to say? This is either we don't use any of it, or we use some of it, or what? And Pete, you're feeling that we can't use any of it.
I'm not saying that we can. So my thought was if we can cut 500,000 this year, use reserves and everything else to get to kind of, like Matt said last meeting, kind of soften that blow, knowing that next year we still have another roughly maybe $500,000 to cut as well. And next year you won't have to use reserves because we should be in a position if we can cut another 500,000 plus increase taxes more, should come out to where about where we need.
So if we take that 450 off, and I understand we'll have to put that 450 on at some point.
So if you take the buses off this year, you need to cut $1 million next year, in my eyes. Because you're gonna ask for the buses again next year, so now you took 450 out this year that you're just already going to carry over to next year, right?
Very good point.
It's that
quote
or
separately?
you,
Yes.
yes, you can
That's
take
not
the
okay.
buses out this year and, you know, hopefully get through this, use your reserves, but then you're using reserves again next year. So then it's a 3-year process to get to where so you're committing to using reserves for the next 2 years by using the buses as your scapegoat this year.
So if we use the buses this year, Pete, and you're so much better than this than I am, if it's educational, I can probably tell you what you want to know when it comes to this. I really struggle. This
1
is-
plus 1 does not equal 2.
Right. So you're saying that without using the buses this year, that kind of is a double down in what we would have to do over the course of not just next year, but over the course of 3 years. And then we would have to be extraordinarily diligent next year when we're looking at staffing and not just teachers, but administration.
And you're gonna have to probably go to the cap on your taxes each year too.
How much does it go up if you do the proposition, let's say we do the proposition, you take it out of this year's budget for this vote, you do the proposition, it passes, and you're gonna finance it over 5 years and you're gonna get reimbursed on those 5 years. What is the increase in cost to do it that way?
We only have estimates because we don't have the
Right.
exact fees. So between the financial consultant and attorneys, it would be $5,000 to $7,500 per year because it would be a band. So every year the band would be reissued. And then we would pay a fifth of the total price every year. So $90,000 would still have to be budgeted for in the general fund budget because we'd be approving financing it rather than paying it up front. Then there would be interest, which right now interest rates are higher. During COVID, they were at record lows, so it's hard. Looking at a rate now, I can't predict what that'll be in 4 years, because again, this would be
Right.
refinanced every year. But you could probably guess 3% a year.
But if you're paying the 90, but you're getting reimbursed the 90, doesn't that become a wash? I understand there's other expenses that are gonna make it a little bit higher, but you're gonna still be selling those 2 buses,
Right.
which gives you a pot of money to
Right.
pull across those
Correct.
years, right?
Yes, so instead of the $450,000 coming out all this year, it would be coming out over the course of 5 years, which would be the same time you're getting aided. So the additional cost each year would be between $5,000 and $7,500 for the attorneys and the financial consultants, and then the interest.
But there was gonna be a surplus of around 20, so 4 of those years would in some way be covered.
Yeah,
Or
so
depending on
total
how you
over
allocate the
5
20.
years, somewhere between 25,000 and 37,000 for fees, plus roughly 3% a year in interest. So it would, even trading in a bus, we probably won't get that much for a bus, but it wouldn't be too far off.
Okay.
So I think a question is, and all your points are well taken, Pete, and then yours also, Justin. I think Pete's saying there's a lot of work to do, and Justin's saying we're not gonna get that work done tonight. I think that's a process that needs to start in November of next year. To me, a question is, do you wanna go out at 0%, or do we wanna go out at the tax cap, which is negative 2.6?
The only thing I would advise about the negative tax cap is remember your levy for the previous year starts the formula for the next year. So we're gonna be behind again. When we do the tax cap next year, our maximum levy is gonna be low again.
Even if we go out at 0, what do you kind of figure next year's to be?
It depends on our capital exclusions, which the buses make a difference, the capital outlay makes a difference. The things the previous year is calculated in one section of it, the upcoming year is calculated in another section. So I'm
So
not
the
sure.
absence of those expenditures would drive down that negative tax cap.
So we're
And
just.
make it
you're
worse
digging
for
a
the
hole
scenario.
deeper.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, at the end of the day, by using those things to get down to where we need to, you're just digging the hole deeper.
Can you cut that percentage in half? Do like 1.75 to make people happy to see it go below 2? Like would that, it's just pennies there, pennies there, I don't know. Would that make some voters happy? I mean, it's really not a lot when we are looking at the grand scheme of things, but
My feeling right now is I think the voters in general are a little more educated now. Like, I think this is probably bringing some attention to,
Okay.
and maybe get some more people to show up to vote. I don't know.
But you need it, I mean, you need 10% more yeses than no's,
Right.
which is not nothing.
That's the hard part,
That's something.
right?
Is there an opportunity to do less buses? Still purchase a bus, but do less numbers? I
Do
think we're
one.
asking for 3 buses, correct?
Well, wasn't it one large and then 2
Too
vans?
small,
Yeah,
one
too
with the
small,
wheelchair
one
lift,
with
yes.
One hit a wheelchair.
So if we could eliminate one of those buses and at least bring that price down, but still obtain the revenue from that and keep us in good standing, would that be an opportunity for us?
Oh, that's a good idea.
I don't know, that one bus moves it down enough.
I mean, but
I don't
if-
either. I don't know if it's gonna move it down enough.
But if voters saw that we were making a cut somewheres, would this be an incentive for them to continue that 2.5?
I still am concerned that no matter what we do with these buses, it's still the capital project is the focal point, and to be honest with you. And no matter how many of these videos we do or how much we put it out there, I still don't think people are separating the capital project in this budget.
And there's nothing we can do about, I mean, there's literally nothing you can do about the capital
I
project.
mean, there isn't. No, but I still think that that's, so I think, you know, any voter that sees that we're getting rid of the bus, I feel like their belief is gonna be that we're missing the mark.
They're gonna be more angry because they're,
Yes.
well, you're still building that field, but you're not cut buses.
Right,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
out of ideas.
yeah. Well,
Work the
but it's
giant
reality
machine.
though. That's really what I believe is our no vote. There isn't an adult over 65 that has gone down to one of these JV games or these varsity games that hasn't walked over to me and said, Justin, what the hell is going on over there? This is ridiculous. Not a single one. And I can only explain it so many times in so many kind ways that there's no connection to our current budget and what they're doing right now. This is bought and paid for. It's passed by 6 votes, and that's all it took. And here's where we are right now.
I think that people hear the word capital and they automatically think it's capital project. They don't realize there's a separation of the 2 words. So I think that's a big misconstrued thing too, that I've heard people saying.
That
So
was
they automatically
funded
see the word
already
capital and they think it's
completely,
capital project
Yes.
on the bulletin. So
Yeah,
maybe
it's
there's a
already paid
different
for.
word we could
Yep.
use. And just for when you put the next material, and
But we're
think that's what
obligated
it
to
is,
show a
from what I've
3-part
heard.
budget, and one of the parts of our budget is capital. And we
Yeah.
have to put it in those terms. It's
Okay.
pretty delineated.
When you say it's already paid for, that assumes that $270,000 goes to help pay
Transfers.
for that, though, another contingency budget, then that pops out. So
then
all of a
it
sudden
defers
it's not-
again.
It's not paid for, and we've got to
And that's banned.
finance that.
It needs to be refinanced.
Yeah.
The only thing, you know, just to add, obviously with the contingent budget, it gets the tax levy to be at the 0%. Obviously, it removes the buses, it gets rid of some equipment. Keep in mind, you're also not using, you know, over $1 million worth of reserves. So just to kind of say that if your end goal is to be at the, you know, maybe go out at 0% and also pull out the buses, you know, you're really kind of looking at the contingent budget right now, with some, you know, equipment being pulled and, you know, the capital outlay and the transfer, but you're also not using any of your appropriated fund balance or the use of reserves that were over $1 million. You would have to refinance the transfer to capital over the next, you know, 14, 15 years.
And then
But
would we
it-
have
but-
enough surplus perhaps to, no, it's,
Well, I would follow where you're going with that. So if we don't use appropriated fund balance, Laura, then my understanding is that's gonna sit in surplus for next year.
Right.
That you guys will all make the decisions on, of what are we gonna do with the $700,000 that was to go into the 26, 27, 20, 25, 26 budget.
And keep in mind, with a contingent budget, the board can reduce expenses further than the ones I've already taken out. I've only taken out the ones we have to take out. So if you want to reduce expenses further,
Well, and that's where it goes to personnel. It's a wider brush than what we're portraying necessarily right now. It's a bit, we have more control
Right, I
than
think
just that
John's
right
point
there.
is though, if you're looking at the 0% and taking out buses, you pretty much have the contingent budget with the levy at 0% and you don't need a vote.
So on the contingent budget, do we have to if we just say we're going with a contingent, do we necessarily have to come out with the cuts and things that we want to do before next Tuesday?
The amounts, yes, because you have to.
Itemized amounts or total
Not
dollar amounts?
itemized, I think a general where they're coming from and totals. So you don't have to have exactly what you're doing, but when you approve a budget, hopefully tonight, we would need the bottom line and the planned cuts.
Sure.
Obviously, I'm not gonna have the exact amounts of who's, if it is staff.
It just buys a little more time if it had to come to that to determine what the best course of action would be rather than making rushed decisions. And I understand that we're racing the clock right now,
Yeah.
but
So I feel like from overall, the contingent budget gives us a lot of time. It just sucks then now we're putting it on the youth sports. Like, if that one piece was out of it, I think the contingency budget would be the way to go. But you're gonna put this on the community to pick up the tab because of,
I think you offer the community the 0% budget that has the type of qualifications that I mentioned before. And it's gonna need supermajority. And if it doesn't get it for the reasons you've outlined about the capital project, then your contingent budget. And that's, the board at least then offered the community an option at 0%, which for the, those that are taxpayers that don't have kids in the facility and that, that don't really care, it was at least a compromise. It was 0%. And if folks that support the use of the facilities can help drum up support for that budget, we at least have offered that to the community. The community doesn't want it, the community, that's the way that goes. But
And
I
then
don't,
we go into the contingent.
and then there you are, and the community made its decision, and then there you are. So, I ran around numbers of going to the negative 2.6, you don't need supermajority, but that's going to yield less tax levy revenue, which is gonna make these problems worse that you're outlining, Pete. So I don't know that I would do that. I think I would do 0. It's gonna need, if you use the full appropriate fund balance, it's gonna decrease your need for reserves because you lopped off 450,000 and you only took off 2.5%, which we arrived at is $160,000. So you've got like $290,000 of found money, and that can come off the use of reserves.
so take the bus, put the bus back in.
Oh, back in?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just want to see what we have to do.
So with the bus back in, I just changed that number though, so we can, so another 450, 500.
So if we use 500,000 from reserves. just to
A
make-
full 500?
You wanna-
Well, they'd have to. There, high balance. So this would be your appropriated fund balance. This would be your use of reserves.
So I'd
and-
say we
That would be your budget.
agree on what we would take out of reserves this year. And then cut what we want out of that list on the left to balance.
When you say a list on the left of the capital.
The
and-
stuff that would come out of the contingency anyway. So once we agree on what to pull out of reserves for this year, and then pull off of that list on the left to
What do you
balance it.
propose that we use out of reserves?
If I knew we were cutting another 500,000, I'd say I'd use 500,000 in reserve, but I feel like you're gonna need that next year to possibly help to bridge the gap, so I think it has to be much less than that.
Well,
So I'm thinking
Would it not work if you're?
So type in 250 there if you would, please, Laura.
In reserve,
Yep. Instead of that 621.
Thanks, Pete.
And so what do we need?
371, 416.
Natalie had offered that maybe we don't cut the full 450, there's $80,000.
I can tell you what the buses cost. The full-size bus is estimated at 182,500. The small bus is 121,000, and the small bus with a wheelchair lift is 143,000.
So 80,000 doesn't get you anything?
What's
So
that?
80,000 doesn't get you anything?
No.
So all the small stuff below, everything below the capital outlay would be 133,000.
Say that again, Pete, please.
Everything below the capital outlay, that would be 133,000.
So you still need another 240.
Can't you just cut those numbers in half, or is that not allowable? Like the capital quality and the transfer to capital, can you like cut those numbers in half?
We need that transfer to capital so we don't
You can
have to
pay,
refinance.
so you pay the,
Right.
Okay, sorry.
It's a good question.
Can we just take a step back? I know everybody wants to get to zero, and I'm not suggesting that that isn't the way you should go, but I'm just thinking out loud here. At the county level and at the local level, all these governments are, and, everybody wants to keep zero increase, right? But then you get to a point where you have to move up, and then the voters are like, well, why didn't we just move it up a little bit at a time? I don't want to do a big jump now to whatever. And I don't know, is there someplace in the middle, like 1%, or you think nobody's gonna vote if it's zero? You don't think it's gonna pass and we're gonna be stuck with a contingent?
One of the things, like 2.5, just, 1% just gets you $60,000. And we need 371 there.
Right.
So I get what you're saying, but you can do your one, but we're still gonna need $310,000.
Right.
I know.
Okay.
I guess
you-
what my concern is next year and the year after that, you're going to, I guess people have to realize at some point this is coming. And it's not gonna stay zero forever. So I guess I'm just trying to make the point that if everybody thinks it can keep being done at zero and things stay the same or relatively the same, that's not gonna be what's gonna happen. It's gonna be a very significant change to operations. And I'm a proponent of services for kids, so I really don't wanna see a significant change in services and education to the kids, because an educated populace is a better populace, in my opinion. I want somebody to be taking care of me and paying taxes so I can retire. So I want an educated workforce, whatever they do, trades, higher education, whatever. But it seems
and I
like
think we tried to, we definitely tried to do that last year with the increase, and historically speaking, we've been at 0.9%.
Yeah.
And that's just not enough. I think the issue that it is that it's negative, and people are saying, well, if it's negative, even if you go up to 1, that's 3.5 higher than it needs to be. So it's a very tough kind of concept to grasp. And I don't disagree with you. That's why we went out 2.5. And it didn't work,
Yeah.
clearly.
And I think if one would pass, then I would go with that number. It's a question of if those that are in favor, they see 0% of the contingency, are they gonna?
Right. I'm glad I'm not on the board. These are tough decisions you guys are gonna have to make, and that
They-
people are gonna have to deal with one way or another.
Well, and that's just that.
I'm done on June 30th.
I know.
I think the tougher deal is gonna be next year.
Right,
That's
well,
the
that's
tougher-
what I'm
this
saying.
This is easy compared to what's gonna happen next year.
Right, we're on the precipice of major change. I think that's what all the voters need to
They don't need to
understand.
know
The
that.
capital
coming
improvement
one way or another.
project, when does that money start coming back? You mentioned that you were kind of paid to do it, you spend the money and then it comes back to you.
What is that, on the capital project?
Yeah.
So we get aided on the project, so we didn't spend $23 million and we're waiting to get it back. It's different money for these capital projects, every 5 years, every school district's in a rotation in which you do a building condition survey, you prioritize your needs and your wants, and then you roll out, it's really what we've reserved in our capital reserve over those 5 years is the amount of project we can go out at. So you'll hear districts go out with lower $8-10 million projects. You'll hear school districts that will go out with a $90 million project. It's really just the amount that we were able to accumulate over those 5 years. And when we go out to vote, it's what's in those reserves that allows us to get it. So honestly, the state usually gives us about 7 to 8-fold on what we have invested. So if we save $2 or $3 million over 5 years in our capital reserve, you multiply that by, times 8 or so, you get $24 million. That's what the state is saying, you can do that amount of work. So then we work with our architects and figure out, how to spend the money. So it's a little bit different than like yearly state aid on anything else.
So if you spend that money you have in your reserves on a project, they'll give you the 8% match.
For a capital project, that's what our investment is. It's usually around 7 or 8-fold on that, correct?
Can you go back, Oscar? So, got here, so put 132,000 down where you would, the buses.
Oh, buses, 133?
It's kind of
Buses in and,
Is there an income generated through that project?
so what's the bottom look like now? 271. So I mean, even if you used $500,000 in reserves this year, you still can't, without cutting the buses and stuff.
No, the buses that's it.
But it's not, yeah, it gets you through, but I still feel like it's just,
so you want to take that reserves back to 479 then, and
no, I don't want to.
shall we?
Shall we?
Here's just another thing for the board just to think about, and I don't know if you want to make it. After 2027, as of right now, as I sit here at 6 o'clock, we're not going to be able to buy any more diesel buses.
Well,
I
that's
have
my
no
other-
idea in a couple years if there is going to be a whole bunch of grant funding to purchase electric buses. I mean, obviously they're 3 times as much. There isn't a district in this state that's going to be able to afford those, and I got to think something has to give here, and I don't know if that's for the better or for the worse. I know school districts that are loading up on diesel buses right now.
That was my other thinking, is like, we're better off getting the bus now, because you might want to do that for the next 2 years to buy yourself some time, if that comes through, to figure that out, because my feeling is if Hochul somehow does get reelected, she's going to stick to that electric bus thing.
Right, so, just food for thought.
So that's another reason I think we're better off getting the bus now, because you want to build up your surplus of diesel buses to possibly get you through a year or 2 there.
So then the option is you just float the same budget all over again
Yep.
and see what happens.
Well, that's it.
And I wish you
that's
could
it.
know. I wish there was a crystal ball and you could know. You would hope that, at least through all of the conversations I've had with people that watched and have been asking questions, they're like, oh man, I wish I would have known that. Like, I would have went and voted, or I might have voted differently. And it's like, you wish that you reached enough people over the rejected budget between then and now that people would be like, oh man, like, we really need this to pass, or else, holy cow, this is the risk. But again, that is a risk. Like Matt said, supermajority is not to be taken lightly, and if it doesn't pass, you are stuck. You're
So
stuck.
to me, if we go back out with the same budget, Worst case, we go back to the contingency, which other than the youth sports, which I have to feel like we can figure something out on that. Because if you go out at zero, you're basically living with a contingency budget. So you're better off, I think, gambling and going out at the 2.5% and hoping that enough people have become educated and want to show up and do it.
You need a huge advertising campaign if you do that. So you need to hit the Hall of
They would
Fame
be-
people, travel teams, orchestra, band, PTO, baseball, cheer, basketball, and football. All those youth people, you're gonna have to hit all those parents and tell them, what do we need to do to get you to drag you in here to vote? Because you will all be impacted if this does not pass by a supermajority. So we really need, like, if we're doing that, people really need to get all those organizations in this door to vote, because there's a lot of, look, there was only, what, 300 and change people that voted, so.
But
And
isn't
half
that
of
the
those were
average?
retired
Yeah,
people,
usually.
Give or
That's
take,
the
last year,
average.
or more, because that, when I was here, that's what filled the room,
Yeah.
so.
On that youth thing there, Pete, I like when you say we'll figure something out, like I don't know what you'd
I don't
figure
know
out.
how.
I think the fact is families are paying. I think
Families are paying.
unless there's a benefactor that shows up and says, I'm gonna cover the cost of this, I don't think you're figuring it out.
Guess that's encouragement to come out and vote then.
That's the thing, we need to get all those organizations, the word needs to be spread, and those families need to come in to vote, and all of those groups that will be paying fees need to know this is what's going to happen. We'll need to advertise that heavily in the next 2 or 3 weeks. All these organizations are going to be impacted if this budget doesn't pass. It needs to be the truth be told and out there.
so at the end of the day, you know, I'd hate to be sitting here in 2027, and it looks like I may be, and then say, dang it, I wish we would have purchased those buses, because now we're compelled to do this. And
So your budget's gonna be harder next year. as it is.
Exactly, right. So then I go back to, do we make that a proposition and make it a choice? That we buy the buses or we don't? Because it's gonna fall back on the voters at the end of the day, right? Of whether or not we're going to have to either do it now or wish to God we had 2 years from now, if that's the case. So I initially, when this failed, I thought to myself, okay, so many times from my experiences over the years, budgets fail, they go right back out, and you get a larger majority of people to vote and it passes. But those aren't your supermajority votes. Those are just typically straight majority, right?
just
So
majority.
like, that's where we're caught in a bit of a bind here. After all of this discussion, I gotta be honest with you, every single minute of the day, I am thinking about this and which is the best way to go, all the way down to, on my ride here, I was talking to Pete, and it's like, I'm talking to him and he's saying this, or I'm talking to Mallory or Jackie or anybody, today, and it's, I wanna make sure this is the best choice that a choice that voters make today, that they have the understanding of what the impact it is going to be on them tomorrow, and not 2 years from now, saying, well, you know, we should have given them the option here, but this is a choice that's gonna be a long-term choice.
Sounds like everything's gotta go that doesn't affect the child's education directly.
Well, it's gonna be more than that. I mean, we're getting to the point where they've said it every way possible that at some point, that's gonna change. But
Yes,
that's-
ratios are going to change.
Yeah.
And it's just happening to us sooner because we have that negative tax cap right now, and it will happen to other school districts down the road.
I think
And I
it's
don't mean far
happening.
down the road, it's,
No, I think it's already happened and it's going to be happen, and I said at the last board meeting, the last budget workshop, we are one of the only districts that went out with a budget that did not include cuts already in. They already went in cutting for next year.
right.
We didn't.
cuts in personnel. I just want everybody to understand,
Absolutely.
not cuts total. You mean cuts in personnel.
All across the
Right.
board, people, programs, equipment, all expenditures. Most budgets went out with multiple cuts. You've got districts in this area down to one principal. You've got districts in this area that have an art teacher that bounces between 3 buildings.
Or one PE teacher.
Or one
for-
PE
yeah.
teacher, like I said, we are very fortunate here. I don't ever wanna see us get to the day where we have to do that. Ever want us to get to that day. I hope it never happens.
But it will.
But what's the alternative?
That's right, Candace. Like,
It's going to happen.
That's it,
just
it's going to
when and
happen.
How severe,
Like,
how soon you want to.
we are not gonna always have the staff at the level that we have it, and that's just the bottom line. Our hope is that it's gonna be done through attrition, through retirement.
Right.
But the reality is, it probably is not going to be. This
Not
year,
yet.
as much as I was just talking to Mrs. Bookmiller, and I gave her a hug and said, thank you so much for giving all of these wonderful experiences to my 3 kids that have had you. And I said, I'm gonna miss you, from my daughters. And I said, Natalie, Lauren, give her your best face possible, and maybe she'll teach all the way through you. And she said, it's not gonna happen. We're kind of we're not putting faces onto these people that aren't going to be here. And that's, I think, unfortunate. These people we're going to miss. Is it a possibility that we would replace them with the same caliber? Low, but very low. But are we still creating a long-term hole, not having these people here? You can't answer. No, it's an absolute yes. So I get what you're saying, Pete. I don't feel like this 6 gone is not kicking the can down the road. It's the acknowledgement that we can't continue to do what we did back in 2000 when we hired these great educators.
No, the 6 is not kicking the can down the road. This list on the contingent, this is kicking the can down the road.
Yes.
No, by no way am I taking anything away from the 6 positions that aren't rebuilt. That was our attempt to make this budget work.
And I felt that was drastic.
And it was, and I think we all did, and I think we were all like, wow, that's pretty drastic, but obviously the public spoke, and that was not enough for them, and, you know, that's just where we're at. I mean, when you stand back and look at it, it's not to take anything away from anybody, it's just the facts of,
People
again,
thinking
you have
about it.
you have to remove the emotion from
Oh, no, I get
it.
it.
You know,
I get it.
It sucks, and I get that, but you know what, that's what it is. You know, you can sit here and say what if and this and that and all at the end of it, but at the end of the day, it's $1.3 million this year that you're trying to make up. And that, you know, and that just builds for next year if you don't cut anything this year.
So if we put the buses to proposition, keep it at 2.5, and the proposition fails, that just,
Make sure you eat the contingency.
They're independent of each other, if that's what
Make
you're
sure you deal
asking.
with it now.
so that would
So you
be,
could, they would vote on the budget.
Yeah.
And then the second question would be the bus purchases. That could go down.
right.
Your budget still passes.
So you could go down to
We'd-
2%.
We'd
and
have
then the
to,
buses.
we'd have to just double check with our attorneys. If your budget goes down, then obviously the second proposition doesn't matter because you're going to contingent and there's no bus purchases anyway.
So John, just so the community understands, if it, on the voting sheet, because that's what people want to know, if you pulled that out, there would be a box that says, I do or do not vote for this budget, and then there would be another thing that you would have to select, I do or do not support the proposition for the buses.
Correct, and we have those resolutions in front of us tonight, that if you wanted to do that, knowing that that second proposition, we would just have to finance the buses in a different way instead of coming from, you know, the general fund, that they would have the choice. But just keep in mind, they're independent of each other to an extent where the budget could pass, but not the bus purchases. But if the budget doesn't pass,
It's a moot point.
it doesn't matter what the bus purchases are, we're going to a contingent, even if Prop 2 passes and Prop 1 doesn't, Prop 2 is kind of
That-
really contingent on.
So it's really the same way of putting the same budget out there, you're just putting in 2 different line items.
With-
the budget would be minus that 450,000.
Right.
The budget would be
Yeah.
back to
So
what I
that's
was
why you'd be-
proposing.
And then
the
depending
negative
upon what we
3%.
get back from our surplus, could that perhaps pay for those like, I don't know how I don't know where
It's
we're at.
divided into, so the buses we purchased in the current year will get aided on 1/5 for the next 5 years. And that aid will be coming on as debt service and aid from the other buses are falling off. That's why we do the rotating schedule, so it stays flat. I thought the reason for putting buses on a separate proposition though was in case the budget does fail, you can still buy the buses. So I'm not under,
Not if you go to a
We'd have to
Not
double check
contingent,
with the
yes.
attorneys, because we're at the point now that if the budget doesn't pass, we have to go to contingent, and you
And that's
can't have the
gone.
bus purchases.
right.
But you have Proposition 2 that would allow those bus purchases to
And
occur.
we'd have to double check with the attorneys, does that supersede?
I think it
Yeah.
does, because that's the purpose of doing that, otherwise there'd be no, I would want to verify that.
Yes.
But I believe that's the purpose of putting the buses on a separate proposition, is so that you could still have them even under contingent budget, because voters are approving them separately.
I think, however, if you put the buses on the proposition, that's a no-brainer that people should vote for because of the mandate of electric buses coming. The fact that most of this is gonna be recouped in aid. I mean, I would hope that people would understand that. I mean, yes, it's gonna be now a little bit more expensive if we swing it out on a proposition. But if you don't have the buses at all, and we get stuck in a position where we have to start buying electric buses, you said those are triple the cost of a bus that we're buying now that will help us not have to buy an electric bus for a longer period of time. I think, isn't Leroy School District stockpiling, buying a bunch of buses so they don't get stuck having to pay for these electric buses? So,
It is kind of important to know if one fails and two passes, is two still,
I'm asking now, they
okay.
said they'd be available, so you know what, let me just give them a quick call.
Yeah, please do, because that would be,
Because wouldn't that be something?
that would be an interesting thing, yeah, you wouldn't, I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Would we have to go?
I just wouldn't know if it would supersede, like you have a separate proposition, but then if your budget doesn't pass the second time around, then you're forced to go to a contingent, like, because you went out as a separate proposition, does that override
I don't-
the
I
state?
don't-
And
What's the contingency law
Yeah,
on
and
that?
I wouldn't know.
I think that's a question for the attorney, like you
I
said, there are
honestly
certain
would-
things
I
that
would-
can and can't go into a contingency budget. This is a question, if something is passed in proposition, but your budget fails.
But then
can we
wouldn't
take
this
it
be
out
a
of
way to
here?
circumvent the contingency budget and almost act as a loophole, so if like you.
That's what I mean.
I'd be very surprised.
Right, because then if it does count, then why wouldn't more people do this?
That's
It's-
a big
Right,
piece
what-
of
right,
information I think you need before you make that decision, one way or another.
Because if you were concerned about this going into contingency, couldn't you bundle some of these capital items in a way that they turn into propositions, and then you could have people pass propositions and have the budget fail? Right, like, you see what
I
I'm
mean, I
saying, like circumvent.
Feel like
those-
someone must have already
Who's
thought
gonna
of that.
vote no, but vote yes to the capital purchases? Like, what community member?
I don't know, I,
Vote the budget down, but say, yeah, I'm gonna let them spend a bunch of money.
it's no
on
across
that.
the board, right?
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't, logically, I don't see,
So the capital in this budget is for future projects?
No, it's for what it's what we're using to function today, so like, Mr. Meeker, it's like a zero
So
turn.
they take the money out of your reserves and put it into your budget pretty much or something? How does that
So I
happen?
think it's the word capital that's a little confusing because it's used in multiple contexts. So there's like the capital project, which is what you're seeing outside. And then there are other capital components that are in there right now. They're not one and the same. So, Justin, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so like you've got a zero turn mower right there. That's part of our overall capital here that we'll use to mow if it's purchased, right? And then you've got other things like band equipment that we would use right away. I think the other thing, Mr. Muker, that I've had a hard time with myself is the capital outlay projects, which are totally separate from the capital improvement plans. And so when you think of a capital outlay, it's $100,000 that we'd have to spend. But then we get back like 90,000. And it's been things like, so in the elementary, in the elementary building, there's really outdated, it used to be a computer lab when I was a kiddo here. And they've really torn it all down and built it back up, so it's more of an interactive, like, science room that kids can benefit from. Another one was the signage on the back out here, so people knew how to get into the building. I think we've done the dividers. So in essence, you do a huge room for 10 grand,
Yeah.
right? And so
Was
that's
that
for me the hard part.
Capital.
Outlay. So it has to be within the envelope of your building. So it's a big drop of money for a little bit of an investment. And if we take that away, then we have to restart that all again. You know what I mean? And then put that $90,000 out there or $100,000 out there to get that 10 grand back. And I don't know that I don't believe that we were doing this forever before John came here.
Doing
The capital outlay. I really don't believe that you were, John. I feel like this was something new to Christine when we first came on.
Oh, I wonder if Nicole was doing it.
You think so? Yeah.
They will have to get back to us.
I confused that earlier when I referenced the
Yeah.
income
That's probably a question.
generated. Now it makes sense.
I would say 2
It's
years.
like a grant, right? You're getting.
So
In
we
a
had
sense.
contingency within a
Encouraging you to do
contingency
certain
tonight.
projects.
So it took me about 2 years to get that not confused.
So something to think about, Natalie just showed me one of our slides. So with decreasing 6 positions this year, we only saved $100,000, right?
Yes, because that's our contract, so all employees.
So next year, that line item's gonna go up, say,
Mhm.
$500,000. So next year, now you're trying to cut 1.8 if nothing else goes up.
Yeah, that's gonna continue. We're gonna have to combat all contracts. OATA, CSEA,
But that's what I'm
admin.
saying is by going out another year, you're further behind the snowball now. And now so like this year, it's basically 1.3 we're trying to cut. Next year, that alone, just salary increases, puts you at 1.8 million, that now we are behind the 8 ball.
Just because of contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 1.3, are you getting that from the changes
bottom line, yeah.
proposed there?
Yeah.
I don't, so that 738,000 appropriate fund balance, like if assuming it's there, like if we don't spend that, then that just becomes money that you guys put into reserves next year, so.
True, yeah, that you can pull out of that, right?
I think it's more like, it's more like $500,000 than it is that 1.3. And hopefully that 738 is there. And again, and then last year, when we did our reserves, as I said at the last meeting, we put money into reserves knowing this was coming to help soften the blow so that we could use it. And
And
not
scale
have-
back.
and have a soft landing, not a hard landing, to get this back into check. John's talking about a few retirements next year, so you're talking about a net of 6 this year. Sounds like he knows of a few already. But 6 is a lot.
It is, yeah.
That was a lot.
But it was 6 just to save $100,000.
$100,000. And the medical premiums, the dental premiums, all of that went up this year
Mhm.
quite significantly. And I can only imagine that next year it will do just as much. Working in healthcare, I see these premiums going up astronomical. So I think you guys were low. I think Christine had roughly said like 4% at one point. And now these are coming in at 12%. So what is next year gonna bring?
Can I ask, how are 6 positions only equal to $100,000?
Because of the contracts for the raises every year. So all the raises.
So when you have a retirement, you know, it's obviously there's salary, you know, benefits and all of that. So let's say roughly it's $100,000
For one position, that's retired?
for one position.
Okay.
The OATA though has 95 members to it.
Okay.
And it's under contract, so you talk increases in step and salaries and benefits and health insurance and all of that. So someone goes, oh, you just saved $100,000. Well, we saved $600,000 on those 6 teachers, but like you said, the increase for the rest of them was $500,000.
Yes.
It just
What?
shows.
So that's,
So you're
And
really.
that's like every year?
Every
It
year.
goes up $500,000?
It- I- it-
Roughly?
it-
There's a
Contract.
step program. It's a
Based-
step program,
It's based
but
on the
still.
contract.
That's an,
Right.
that's,
How are we ever going to get where we need to be then?
This is the struggle that we have today.
This is
That's
the
only gonna
struggle,
get
and what
worse.
makes it worse, and I go back to the original cause, is this foundation aid formula.
Right.
We as rural school districts have advocated, we've gone to Albany, we've written letters, we've talked to our congressman. How they compute this foundation aid formula is crushing rural school districts. And, you know, even the sense, you know, someone said, well, you should get aid based on the number of kids you have. So if you're having declining enrollment, then you shouldn't get as much money. I completely disagree. Our special ed services have gone up. The amount of, you know, people that we need to service and provide OT and PT and hearing and all of that is definitely going up.
You don't get extra based on all that, it's just rural district, boom, this is your percent or your amount, they don't look at those individual things?
And currently, right now, they're in flux with this whole, you know, commission and how do you make it equitable and how do you know, run a formula? I mean, it's outdated and there's lots of input that we've had and it's still just not, it's not equitable.
Can you speculate, well, of course you come from Clarence, maybe know Clarence or Orchard Park or some of the more affluent districts than the rural. So there's state aid there at 16 million and then there's tax levy at 5.8 million. Can you speculate the ratio difference in the more affluent districts?
More of the tax levy obviously
So
covers,
Is
they,
tax levy higher than state aid?
much higher, yes. A
So I
lot of
think that's my
affluent
point. So
districts,
just flip those two things, so.
Correct.
So that's, your tax levy in Orchard Park is 16 million, your state aid is 5 million, so they're much less at risk of what goes on in Albany. But
Right.
also, if your tax levy is 16 million, when you increase 1%, you're
right.
$162,000.
More affluent districts have an easier time raising funds because it comes from tax levy. So a rural district has a much harder time because an increase
It
in
just
tax
paints a
levy
picture
isn't a lot of dollars.
How you could affect, you know, your future through tax levy versus how we are affected by what goes on in Albany.
Right, there's a pie chart, and our total budget, I wanna say, how much is state aid?
I think
I would say like 63, 64%.
60%.
Some of these other school districts only rely at 55% because the majority they're getting through their tax levies and, you know, it's difficult. Difficult calculation.
Where do we settle at here? We proposing the same budget, we went zero?
I think we should propose the same budget. I'm at a loss.
Terrified of it.
I hear what everybody out here is saying, and I'm afraid that if we don't give that back to them, I would love to see if we could do the same budget and then a secondary budget. You could do both.
I look at the contingency budget, the zero budget is basically the same, other than obviously the facilities things is what sucks. So to me, it's like, let's swing for the fences and.
I don't think you'd wanna offer more than one option. I just think this
Yeah.
out loud.
I don't think
because
you can.
Oh,
You can only put up one budget to vote.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
was it?
default is contingent. You
Was
could
it
do a
on the
separate
end?
proposition.
Yeah, on the initial one, you could do that? Is that what we talked about?
You can put up the original budget, a revised budget, or just adopt a contingent budget. You can't put multiple
You can't
budgets
do
up
the
to the,
two.
yeah, you can only
To
put
adopt
one
one
at a time.
and
Yeah.
move it forward.
For future, on original budget vote day, like for next year, can you give the community a couple different budget
No,
options?
one
Oh,
budget.
So that's one budget as well?
One budget.
Yes.
Yep.
Even if you could, where I was going there is when you need supermajority,
Yeah.
if you offer a bunch of options, you're much
Dilutes
less
Yeah, I don't know
likely
how
to
you-
supermajority.
Yeah.
how you
Just-
figure which,
Right.
I think especially if we're not able to make additional true cuts this year, you need to start building the additional revenue to start building that.
I agree.
Because otherwise, next year, if you go out at zero this year, and you get that, you're just hurting your tax cap next year even more.
That was my thought.
Well, and if anybody's listened to this conversation, you know, it's not us being insensitive to what the voters' feelings are. It's really looking down the road, not. And it's not a good road to look down. It's amazing how we've come back full circle. I don't know what you're thinking, Jack.
Originally, I was like, I just think it's a slap in the face if you go back out to the same exact thing to everybody, and we gave it to them, and they obviously, I mean, it was difficult to give what we did anyway. We all, I don't know, it wasn't easy to get there, but informed conversations and discussions. I still think if you give a choice, you need to give people a choice, and hopefully, even the education in the last 2 meetings, and maybe everybody spreading conversation, if you give people a choice of, this is what you have as an option, this is what you're gonna get if you don't. And that choice really is, you gotta put it back on the community, and I think we, and if we pull that, you're talking about the 2.5, go out with the same, but pull the buses
Pull the
out.
buses
So
out.
that is a change, and
No, I don't think we were pulling the buses.
well, that's
out.
what I'm saying,
Yeah,
what
I think we
is
should
happening, what are you saying?
I say go right back
Go
out.
back.
Yeah.
You go right with the exact same, and you couldn't do the 2.5 and pull the buses?
I would do 2.5 and pull the buses out.
I mean, you're still giving people a choice.
So, I mean, the 2.5 is necessary to buy the buses. Like, if you did 2.5 and pulled 450,000,
Yeah,
then,
now you're making
Because
more
that's-
then you'd be really,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
raising a
You'd
lot
have
of
to do
revenue
like
for
1.8.
non-expensive
Well, you just
buses.
wouldn't use as
Yeah.
many reserves.
That would help.
Right.
It wouldn't be with the.
Right, but we'd be saving all the interest
So
we'd
what-
have to be
what-
paying if we
There's
did
no way you're
separate
getting that.
proposition.
There's no way you're getting the taxpayer to do
No,
2.5
2.5.
and
pull
get
the
your
buses
buses.
out.
That's worse
We're
than what we
asking
offered
for more.
before.
Yeah.
So it would be 0% and,
No.
or the contingency, that would be it, it's one or the other. And hope that the education and of people and spreading conversation and words to get people to vote, and
Is Mallory still with us?
No, she's not.
she gone.
She
Oh,
fell asleep.
Goodbye, Mallory.
sorry, Mallory. Thought she was awful quiet over there.
And I'd be honest, coming into this meeting, there was no way that I was coming in as, let's throw it back out there.
No, not in the car, not what you
neither.
said to me in the car, right at all, no.
I'm afraid if we don't go back out and ask for that 2.5, what is it gonna do to us next year?
Mhm.
We are gonna be in such a hole next year.
But I think people need to know that. I don't think a lot of people know that.
It's scary to me. I don't wanna lose
I
any
agree with
more
you.
educators.
And like Maria keeps talking about all the wonderful things we have, and she's right.
Mhm.
But people have to understand that in order to preserve that, you have to give something more. We
Comes
can't
at a
just keep
cost.
doing all of this and not
Right.
changing what people, I don't know.
I think what the message is you're already losing people that aren't being replaced.
Yes.
So you're really trying to stay at status quo with this and not go even further down. I mean, you've already lost people. You're gonna lose people next year. That's what they need. I don't think they understand that there is this attrition going on through retirement. But
But I think if we continue to do 0%, we have to lose even more. So
That's correct.
At one point, it might be.
And like
Much
a
more than
hard hit
2.5.
at once,
Right.
not even
Yeah.
like a softened.
Right.
I would
And
love
that
to-
slide was eye-opening. I hope it was eye-opening what the monthly breakdown truly is.
I think that needs to go up.
$200,000 assessed value, you're talking about $7.12 a month.
But that was forecasted to raise annually, right?
No, that's just
That's just
for
one
this-
No, that's just this year.
That's what this budget would do.
That's what this budget would cost you.
Which is less than last year.
If you have a home assessed at $200,000
Paid for.
86.
$86 for the whole year.
Per
Annually.
100,000. So if you have a house that's under 100,000,
It'd be less than 43.
Yeah, for the year.
I don't know that they make houses under 100,000.
I'm sorry?
I don't know if they make houses under 100,000 anymore, unfortunately.
Maybe somebody's good at making their house not look like it's worth it. I don't know.
I think Barry Flansburgh would not agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, can we move into,
So we gotta start a board meeting or what?
yeah,
We can, and this is called a walk-in, under 2.2, you have, there's 3 different resolutions.
my computer's bad, so I don't
Here.
have.
Third one is actually right here,
Justin, you want this?
resolution.
What are you doing?
This is the cord.
Oh, it's a cord. I thought you were doing some crazy move.
This
think
is,
that's the
this
one
is
we-
what you
no, I
would
think
read
it's not.
here, district budget, revote on same budget.
I
So
think
when
it
we get
offers
to
of the contingent 0%.
2.2,
He's got
He's got
Okay.
paper.
Natalie, do you still need one?
I think all work.
No, I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm all right. I got it.
I have more for you.
It'd be interesting.
I got it.
I'll say that.
are you gonna need my agenda here?
I think I got it.
Interesting,
So
that's the word choice you're choosing?
let's fire this up the regular way, if that's okay, Carla. Okay.
Oh, where this, how was loud enough?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was loud. I thought you were gonna stop streaming.
You're getting a couple extra out of me already.
And thank you for the input and questions. I really
You're more
appreciate
than welcome
it.
to stay.
You don't have to leave. You're more than welcome to stay.
This will be,
This is a board meeting.
it's gonna be 2 minutes.
This is really,
Oh, yeah.
you don't have to stay, but thank you.
Making a promise.
Don't feel
Yeah.
pressured.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Go out.
yeah, thank you.
Tell your friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell
Have a good
everybody,
weekend.
please.
Get the word
Spread the
out.
word.
Make a t-shirt.
The
Get on your
budget
horse,
hearing
Triff.
will be Monday, June 9th at 6 o'clock.
Spread the word.
So this will be the presentation to the community then.
Is it a similar forum where people can come and ask questions?
It will be us just explaining the budget, ask us questions, and we will very much try to, explain more of certain lines and what things are or aren't. We will send out another budget newsletter. I think we're working on a frequently asked questions section. So, if people have,
I'm putting my foot.
we received a lot of feedback, which was very good, so we're gonna try to clarify some of the, information or misinformation that was out there.
Thank you.
See you later, guys.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I would like to officially start this meeting at 6:30, and if we could please rise and say the pledge of allegiance to the flag.
That was my fault.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mrs. Cole, could you take attendance, please?
Mrs. Benjamin? Mrs. Thompson?
Here.
Mrs. Younger Davis?
Present.
Mr. Lamb?
Here.
Mr. Scabell?
Present.
Mrs. Emerson?
Here.
Mr. Ziegler?
Here.
Okay, I'd like to go into a resolution after, yep, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, that's
There's
okay,
more-
thanks.
There's more on here.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to approval of minutes. Thanks, John. Be it resolved that the minutes of the May 27th, yeah, this makes sense here. Be it resolved that the minutes of the May 27th, 2025 special meeting be
So
approved.
moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Did I jump the gun there?
You did, buddy. Easy trigger. We'll get there. Motion passes. Thank you. Let's see here. Now down to the resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Oakfield-Alabama Central School District hereby directs that there be a revote on the previously proposed budget for the 2025-2026 school year, and further directs that such a proposed budget be placed before the voters of the district at a budget revote to be held on June 17th, 2025, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 8 p.m., and that a budget hearing on such proposed budget shall be conducted on June 9th, 2025, at 6 p.m. in the district's middle high school library. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jackie. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I'd like to, yep.
no. So, I added another thing, sorry. So,
John,
there's a quick timeline on here. I figured I would just give this to you. I added the cell phone policy as a first reading. No decisions or discussions need to be made about it. There is a timeline of August 1st that we need to have this up on our website. Looking at the number of meetings that we have, I just wanted to give you the option to obviously read it. It is 100% right from the governor's mandate. I included the governor's mandate. The policy that we have written is the exact same one that Erie 1 BOCES just came out with today. So you can just read it and then we can talk about it at the June 17th board meeting. I don't expect any changes because again, it's just the overarching cell phone ban saying that we're going to abide by the mandate. And then Matt and I, along with our administrative team, have been working on some protocols and procedures to enforce that. We do have a public forum to get, input. Matt did go and visit a district, and we think what we have in place, we've met with all of the teachers, we've met with the students. We think we have a very good plan in place. We'd also like to kind of do a trial run before the end of the school year, just to see, what works and what doesn't, minus the seniors, because it won't affect them next year. But I just wanted to provide you the first policy, that policy. It's a very quick read, and you can compare it to the governor's mandate for a first reading, but it will have to be approved shortly because we'll have to have it up by August 1st.
okay. Thanks, John. So we'll take a look at that when we have the opportunity. I'd like to call the meeting to a close at 6:38. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? Thanks. Thank you, guys. That was not easy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Reagan, or Matt Lamb.
Yes. You guys see Paolo de Richburg's winning? Looks like they're gonna win.
They are.
Do I have